This week in South Florida, Broward Sheriff Scott Israel makes waves when he and his family take a cruise on a $35 million yacht, but he didn't report it as a gift as required by law. The sheriff refused to talk about it with local 10 investigator Bob Norman, then went on the radio to blast Bob as rude, aggressive, and disposed to assume the worst. Sheriff Israel wanted to set the record straight about that yacht trip and sat down with me. You'll hear his answers. Plus, the Reverend Al Sharpton comes to town to take part in a civil rights conference. We spoke with him and Bishop Victor Curry about what's next in the Trayvon Martin case. Stories people are talking about this week in South Florida. Good morning. Glad you could join us. The Broward County Sheriff is arguably the most powerful elected official in Broward County. He runs a huge empire of first responders, nearly 1,900 sworn police officers, 800 firefighters and paramedics. Altogether, 5,600 people are on the BSO payroll. Its budget eats up more than half of all the property taxes collected in Broward. Sheriff Scott Israel is the man in charge, elected last November, defeating Al Lamberti. Shortly after he was elected, Sheriff Israel and his family took a 5-day cruise on a luxury yacht, but he didn't report it as a gift as required by law. When Local 10's Bob Norman tried to ask him about it, the sheriff walked away, but he sat down with me on Friday for a no-holds-barred interview. And joining us now is Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel. Sheriff Israel, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure to be here, Michael.
I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I've got some tough but I think fair questions to ask. Bob Norman, my colleague here, has tried to ask you some tough but I think fair questions over the last couple of days, and you won't talk with him. Why not?
Well, I very unappreciative of his approach. It borders on unprofessional, and I find out when I've interviewed with him many times, and I find out that most of the time what I say ends up on the floor of the cutting room. And you're an investigative reporter, and you care very deeply about getting to the facts, and I just want the facts to be out.
Right. So do you feel that he has been unfair, overly aggressive, rude? I mean, I heard you were on the radio late this week in Fort Lauderdale talking about this little contretemps, or big one, and you used some of those terms.
Yes, I think what disappointed me the most is the inaccuracies of his story and his approach to me. He came at me to speak to me. We were at an event over at the Public Safety Building, and Michael, we were talking about what we were going to do as an agency in the aftermath of the Zimmerman trial. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Norman had asked me a question about our response, and then I walked away, and he said, Sheriff, I turned back to thinking it was a second question, and he started asking me about a boat trip, and in a fashion where I was going to answer what he asked, and I didn't want to go down that road.
Okay, what I'd like to do, we have the tape of that incident where Bob approached you and asked you the question, and your comments on the radio yesterday. So listen here, and let's play that tape.
If Mr. Norman or anybody else sticks a microphone rudely in my face and shouts out questions above other people, I'm not obligated to answer that.
How you doing? I got a couple questions just to clear something up. But as you can see, none of that happened.
To take the reputation of the sheriff of Broward County, who lives, eats, breathes, and exudes honor, decency, and ethics, it's reprehensible.
All right, once again, to set the scene, that was you describing that confrontation, or whatever you would describe it.
No, actually it wasn't. In the context of the report, that was a response to how my relationship was. I've had that happen to me before by Bob. It didn't happen to me, as you can see by the tape that day. I just didn't like his approach, and the fact that he was predisposed to ask me if I took a gift, which I never did.
You know, Sheriff, you are a lifelong police officer. You're a tough guy. You ran a tough campaign, a good campaign against Al Lamberti. I mean, you've been in the public arena. You're a public figure. Why shouldn't you answer a legitimate question?
The question predisposed that I took a gift. And as you and every other citizen of Broward County, Michael, holds me accountable, I'm going to hold reporters accountable for being professional. And he predisposed I took a gift, which is absolutely grossly untrue.
All right.
And he had not done his homework.
All right. Well, I've tried to do a little homework.
Okay.
What he was asking you about, and correct me if I've got the facts wrong, is that after you were elected sheriff last November, and before you were sworn in, you, your wife, and your 3 kids took a 5-day cruise on this magnificent ship called the New Life. Here's some video of this. It's 150 feet long. It has a crew of 10. It cost $35 million to build. I mean, it is about as luxurious as it gets, and it rents, if you wanted to rent it for a week, according to the website, $190,000 a week. And you were on the ship for 5 days with your family, and you paid $1,500. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Why?
I went to my attorneys, our future general counsel, and I asked them. I was in virgin territory. I said, "How do we arrive at this number?" I didn't know. Pursuant to Florida law, and whether we like our laws or dislike our laws are our laws, and my job is 2 things: to abide by laws and enforce laws. Our laws gave our attorneys the method of which to find the valuation of that. And all you do when a political elected official goes on a trip, the law requires you to use what you and I would call a coach rate. So we used what would be a coach rate of a cruise at that time, which is travel.
On Carnival Cruise Lines, or on a kind of a low-end cruise line. Not anything wrong with Carnival. You know, Sheriff, Professor Bob Jarvis of Nova Southeastern University, a respected figure, a legal ethicist, says that there really are 2 statutes dealing with reporting gifts. One is simply transportation. Another deals with vacations, and that statute says the value of the gift is equivalent to the total value of the various aspects of the trip. Now, in addition to transportation, I'm sure you ate well, you drank well. I mean, you did, didn't you?
Well, I don't drink other than water, but no, but we ate well. But again, the problem that people seem to have here is that they're opposed to the law. And if you're opposed to the law, there's a way to change it. But the law was followed by me and our staff to the letter. Every I was dotted and every T was crossed.
The State Ethics Commission apparently has a complaint, may have a complaint about this, and may be examining this. And there is a law, as you well know, in the state of Florida that says any elected official who receives a gift of a value of $100 or more must report it. You didn't report this. Wasn't this a gift?
Of course not. It wasn't a gift. If you went out today, Michael, and you bought a shirt at one of the stores, would you call anyone up and thank them for it? You paid for it out of your hard-earned money. That's what I did. We paid for this ourselves. And the people who have called me and the support I've gotten has been unbelievable. People understand there was no gift. I paid for this myself. I did the laudable thing. I did the honorable thing. And as the sheriff of Broward County, I could have claimed it as a gift, but I decided to pay for it.
The yacht is owned by Robert Pereira, lives up on the Hillsborough Mile, I understand, made a lot of money in the construction business in Massachusetts and lives down here now. What is your relationship with Mr. Pereira?
Just friends. We met each.
Must be pretty good friends.
We are. We're pretty good friends. We enjoy each other's company. Our wives are friends. We watched his daughter on occasion. He's got a wonderful, beautiful 8-year-old daughter. We've watched her. We've watched his dog, and we're just friends. We like to watch baseball games together sometimes, and he's a Red Sox fan, I'm a Yankee fan, so there's the good-natured arguments and everything, but there's nothing more than friendship. He's asking for 2 things from me as a sheriff. One is he wishes me much success, and from a personal note, he wants nothing. We're just friends.
He contributed $250,000 to your political action committee last October, a lot of money. I think human nature being what it is, you've got to say to yourself, What does this guy want from the sheriff?
Yeah, well, ethics and honor are what we do when no one's looking. So it doesn't matter what anybody approaches me with. I mean, for 32 years, I have an unblemished record. I'm all about integrity and honor. So there's nothing, there's no issues to ever worry about when I'm at the helm of the Broward Sheriff's Office. And in fairness to Mr. Pereira, he's the salt of the earth. He's a decent humanitarian. He's a giving man. He's a wonderful man. And there's no connection other than friendship. And that's what I think the reporter can't get past.
And if he were to ask you for some favor of some kind, what would you say to him?
Well, I would say no, but that will never happen because he's not going to ask me for any favor. Yeah. He's got too much respect. He's a man of integrity. Of course, unless the favor was appropriate, my job is to serve the public. I mean, I understand.
All right, Sheriff Israel, good leaders, and I think you know this. You have been a police chief. Lead by example. Yeah. If you take, even though you say it's not a gift, you take this 5-day trip on this fabulous yacht. Does that send a message to the road deputies of BSO who are out there getting a donut and a cup of coffee, who may say to themselves, gee, you know, the boss, the sheriff, took this kind of freebie trip, and I'm just going to let these people give me lunch or a donut or a cup of coffee?
To me, clearly, it's apples and oranges. I didn't take a freebie of any kind. If I were told that, you know, that trip was worth $100,000, and that's what the law required me to declare as a gift or pay for it, I wouldn't have gone. I mean, we cannot lose fact. You know, we cannot lose fact or get past the fact that we followed the law of the state of Florida, and that's what the deputies, deputies know I'm a strong leader. I have a strong moral compass. I am a strong leader that's followed by the men and women in the Broward Sheriff's Office, and they know I've done nothing wrong.
All right. Not to make this about Bob Norman, but he has been pretty viciously attacked by some of your friends and supporters. It's their right to do so. But yesterday there was a tweet that went out from the Broward Bugle. The Broward Bugle, as far as we can tell, is run by Roger Stone, who was a political operative, famous operative, went back to the days of Richard Nixon, and he has worked in your campaigns. And he, we believe, is the publisher of the Broward Bugle. And here is the tweet that was sent out yesterday. It says, Channel 10's Bob Norman acting erratic and aggressive. Time for BSO deputies to detain him. Hashtag taser. I don't always know what the line is, but that tweet seems to go over the line.
It does, like many blogs and tweets, and that's what my problem is with people being able to get on blogs and tweets, that you're allowed to write and say whatever you want without having to, the courage of having to put your name on it. First I'm seeing it, but very disappointed. So, I can assure you it didn't come from anybody, or I hope it didn't come from anybody at the Broward Sheriff's Office.
I don't think so. I think it probably came from somebody associated, it appears, to Roger Stone. I mean, will you call up Roger Stone and say, Roger, hey, if that's you, back off. Don't put that stuff out there.
If that was, I would absolutely say that.
Yeah. Sheriff Israel, I'm glad you've come in. I'm glad you had a chance to state your point of view, and I want to invite you to come back in a couple of weeks before the budget for BSO, which runs fire, rescue, police services all throughout Broward. It's a big moment when your budget comes before the Broward County Commission, so come back and we'll talk about that.
I sure will. As you know, I stand for public safety, and we have so many public safety initiatives where we're helping young people, and I really want to talk about them with you, and it'd be my honor to come back.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
You sure will. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This Week in South Florida with Michael Putney. Thanks for watching.
The sad saga of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman simply will not go away, and there are some prominent civil rights leaders who are making sure it doesn't. They include the Reverend Al Sharpton and his local ally, Bishop Victor Curry of Miami. This week I sat down with both men and asked, where does the Trayvon story go from here?
Trayvon Martin had the civil right to go home. That was violated. We have litigated whether it was a murder. We have not litigated the rights of Trayvon Martin to go home.
Al Sharpton is passionate on the subject of Trayvon Martin and determined to change Florida's stand your ground law that played a role in George Zimmerman's acquittal.
You cannot have a law where civilians, you know, I'm used to where we have fought police brutality, and you know some of our work there. Now you give civilians the right to kill people? That's frightening.
Sharpton is joining forces with Bishop Victor Curry for a 3-day civil rights conference at Curry's North Miami church.
How you can go from getting out of your vehicle, stalking this teenager, you end up killing the teenager, you're the only one left to tell the story. Your story is you had to defend yourself. Now, that does resonate with most people, especially in the African-American community.
Sharpton and the Reverend Jesse Jackson have been two of the strongest voices demanding justice for Trayvon Martin. But a prominent black intellectual has written they're basically irrelevant. The Reverends Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton have been consigned to a hard fate. They can never be more than redundancies, echoes of the great men they emulate because America has changed.
If anything showed how relevant this is, 102 cities had simultaneous marches that we called for last Saturday.
A new poll shows that most Floridians still support the Stand Your Ground law as is. The governor says he will not call a special session to reconsider it. All right, up next we will open your mail. And now for the mail, all of it is about the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman story. Michael Band, a prominent Miami criminal defense attorney, wrote to say trials are not morality plays, and the result in this case has been decried by some as unjust. It may be. Verdict forms do not ask jurors to find right or wrong, but guilty or not guilty. We got this email from Rick Scheinman of Miami Beach. He writes, I am white. I am not a racist. I do fear people of any ethnicity in hoodies, baggy pants, and other thug prison apparel badges are threatening to me. Teach your children civility. Kelly Flores had this to say, it is inconceivable that there are people who do not recognize that Zimmerman had an obligation not to get out of his vehicle and pursue Trayvon. And finally, there was this comment from Gary Tenenbaum. He wrote to say, Stand Your Ground is a great law if not abused. If my wife and I walk out of a restaurant and a thug tries to hold us up, the SYG law allows me to terminate him without having to run away because I believe our lives are in danger. All right, still to come, my personal perspective about the luxury yacht trip that Sheriff Israel took with his family. It just doesn't pass the smell test. Before we leave you this morning, a personal perspective about cops and freebies. They shouldn't take them, but occasionally they do. A free cup of coffee or a hamburger from a restaurant owner who is glad to have a uniformed police officer on the premises. Not good, but not a big deal. Now, here's a big deal. A cop taking his family on this unbelievably luxurious yacht for 5 days and paying the equivalent of a trip on Carnival Cruise Lines, $300 a person. That's a ludicrous amount for this kind of luxury, and yet that's what Sheriff Scott Israel paid when he and his family went for a cruise on the New Life. He says he followed the letter of the law by paying that peddling amount. Maybe he did, but it doesn't look like he followed the letter of the law when it comes to reporting gifts. Florida law says elected officials must report any gift worth $100 or more. This trip qualifies, at least in my opinion. The sheriff says he did the honorable thing by paying for the trip, says it wasn't a gift. I'm not convinced. I think he should have reported it as a gift since it cost $190,000 a week to charter that yacht. The boat's owner is a rich guy named Robert Pereira, who also gave the sheriff's campaign $250,000. Israel says Mr. Pereira wants nothing in return. Really? Maybe he just hasn't asked for it yet. The moral, ethical tone of BSO is set by the person at the top, in this case, Scott Israel. He may be on firm legal ground in this case, but it is morally shaky. The sheriff needs to not only act squeaky clean, he's got to look squeaky clean. That's my perspective. Hope you have a great Sunday. Remember, as always, stay informed, get involved. I'm Michael Putney.